Good morning, this is Anna Amelia from Northeast Animal Rights. Today we are talking to Dave Neale, who is the Welfare Director of Animals Asia. This is another one of our Saturday Spotlight interviews, so you'll see this interview obviously in the new year. So welcome Dave Neale from Animals Asia.
Thanks, nice to be chatting to you, Anna.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, we'll just go straight into the questions, okay?
Absolutely.
So I know obviously I've talked before that you're in Stockton at the moment. So how did a northern lad from Stockton get to work with animals in Asia? And what is it about their particular plight that made you think that you wanted to help them?
Yeah, well, good question, and yeah, it doesn't always seem to fit right, does it? Yeah, I mean, I got involved with Animals Asia from traveling. Basically, I traveled in the year 2000, 2001, so nearly 20 years ago now, and I was traveling for a few months out in Asia. I was particularly, I mean, I'd grown up being interested in animals and working with animal welfare organizations. But yeah, while I was traveling, I saw bears which were being transported. So they were in cages and they were being taken, obviously on the back of a truck. And I inquired about it, and it really just went from there. The hotel said to me that they were being taken to a bile farm where they would be used for their bile extraction for traditional Chinese medicine. And so yeah, I found who the organization, which was Animals Asia, based in Hong Kong, who were trying to tackle this, and just kind of said I wanted to do something to help. So that's kind of how I ended up starting, and here I am nearly 18 years later, still with the organization and still sort of fighting for the same cause.
Yeah. So I always say that activism can take many forms. Sometimes people can only do things like sharing petitions or setting up petitions. Sometimes people can do protests. Sometimes people can do what you do. So what sort of activism? I mean, what sort of activism do you think works best, and what sort of activism do you enjoy yourself?
Yeah, I think there's a real range that's needed, and I mean I've not been the one who's sort of been out there on the front line as much in terms of the protests and organising the sort of demonstrations. I've attended some in the past in the UK, obviously, with various issues. But I think there's a need for it, because that helps to bring the public's attention to things. You can get the media involved, obviously, if you've got lots of people out, talking about a single issue. I think that kind of thing is definitely needed. But I've always kind of taken that kind of working more behind the scenes, I guess, and trying to find sort of some common ground with the people that you're trying to change. And and I think that's really always really been the Animals Asia way as well, in terms of actually being based in the places where we are. I've got a team of people working both in China and in Vietnam on the projects that we're trying to change. And those people are trying to develop relationships with the communities which might, are unfortunately, are treating animals in a way which obviously we want to change. And so it's more sort of the softly approach, I guess, is how we've worked. It does bring results, but you have to be patient. You have to be very patient, and you have to play a long game, I guess, because things don't change very quickly, and unfortunately it means you can't change lives for those animals that you see on a daily basis straight away. But I do think there's a need for all types of activism, because behind that, then what I like is that other organizations are making a real big sort of public noise about the issue that we might be dealing with on the ground, because it gives, then maybe it's the government, or maybe it's an industry, or maybe it's a local community, it pushes them into working more closely with the people which are offering the support, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So that kind of leads me nicely into the next couple of questions, because I was going to ask about the practices obviously you're coming across are rooted in culture and tradition. And a lot of that is business led as well. So I mean, obviously people are making money out of this. So you're obviously, you're saying you're taking a softly approach to it. So how much does understanding the local cultures play a part in your work, and how much of it is sort of building relationships with the business, the people who are actually making money out of it?
Yeah, no, it is. It's crucial. I mean, the thing which I'm particularly involved in at the moment in Vietnam is the elephant riding issue. And you can't just sort of turn up and expect to kind of turn that around instantly, because there's a lot of money in it. There's a lot of tourists come to the area. It's not just about tourists coming to ride elephants. It brings tourists into the region, and then obviously they spend money, hotels, restaurants, everything. So the local government are supporting it because it's an income generator. So you have to find an alternative, and you have to work with people to find an alternative which is going to bring in the same amount, if not more, money to the region, but doesn't involve the abuse of the elephants. And that takes a long time. We've been working on this for a number of years, and it also takes commitment to setting up alternatives as well. So for the elephants, we've set up an alternative tourism program in a national park in Vietnam, where people can come and just view the elephants, just watch them in the forest. But we've had to put money in for those owners for the first few years, because there's not much income in that, obviously, because most people want to come to ride elephants. And so we're compensating those owners for not using those elephants for riding whilst we build up the tourism program, and that's beginning to be successful. This year hasn't been great because of COVID, so the number of tourists obviously has gone down again, so we've taken a bit of a knock. We've got to build it back up again as soon as we can. But now what we're seeing, because we've been in the region for a long time, the local government are coming to us saying we want to transition all the elephant riding operations into something more ethical. Again, because of that kind of activism which has happened globally, government have been under a lot of pressure for ending elephant riding, but never really had an alternative. So they've always tried to sort of bat it off and ignore it. Now we're there working on the ground saying this is the alternative. Now they're saying they want to do it. And, and gradually, we're beginning to move the community and the elephant owners away from what they've been used to something new. And what we find with that is that, you find that a lot of the elephant owners are quite compassionate about their elephants. I know, obviously, it's a different compassion to what we would say, because yes, it's like, well, how could you be compassionate yet you send your elephant off to a tourism camp every day? But there's a level of empathy for those elephants. Maybe it's not understood quite as much, the emotional responses of elephants and the need for their social lives and things. But there certainly is a level of care and concern that once you offer an alternative, a lot of people actually say, you know what, I don't like the fact that my elephant gets used like this every day, and I really would like it to have a much better life. And so you've just got to find that. But you can only do that by working with the local community, but working within the local community. So all the people that are working, doing any negotiations with elephant owners or working with the local businesses are all from that region. It doesn't really work, me being, the Westerner sort of flying over to Vietnam and then trying to organize this, because obviously that, it's seen as somebody coming in without the knowledge of the background. So I'm the facilitator of the campaign of the, to sort of put all the pieces together. But ultimately, it's I put people on the ground who can actually do that work, because, it can only happen locally.
Yeah, I think it's what you're doing is it's absolutely vital in terms of creating the alternative. Rather than leaving a vacuum, kind of like saying to them what you're doing is wrong, judging them, feeling judged. And then kind of like leaving it like that, because people need money to survive. So it's a bit like the dairy and the beef industry over here, when we're kind of when we are trying to stop them. We're looking at reformed and all the work Serge is doing and Bradley Nook Farm and all the alternatives there. And I was talking to Rebecca Knowles as well from Farmers for Stock Free Farming. And she's got like all these different pathways of how farmers can actually change their direction. And I think it's absolutely vital, that people who are using animals, exploiting animals at the moment, know that there's help and support out there. And it's kind of done in a non-judgmental way. It's kind of like, look, there's better ways of doing this. Can we help you transition?
Yeah, no, I think you get a lot further by doing that. But obviously, you do have to play this longer game. You do have to kind of, sit down with people that maybe you're not comfortable with, and maybe you're not comfortable with some of the responses that you're going to get from them. But ultimately, I don't think there's another way of doing it, really. To be successful for something like that, particularly on an issue like we're working with in Vietnam, where it is really about income for themselves and their families. And if we just ask people not to visit, then there's no income, and actually then they haven't got money to feed those elephants as well. So ultimately the elephant will get sold on probably to a safari park or something, where again to one of the local zoos, where its welfare will still be bad. Whereas, you know, with this, we've got a real alternative. We've got a national park nearby who we're working with, and who are happy to accept the elephants to actually come and live in the national park, and we can encourage those elephants obviously to live, you know, to live a much healthier life for the rest of their lives, and still, you know, people can get income from it. So yeah, but you do have to play that long game. You know, this is, you know, we're 5 years into it now, and some of these elephants are going to be around for another 30, 35 years, you know, and you've got to be able to say, look, we as an organization are still going to be here when your elephant is in its 60s and 70s supporting you to do this. Otherwise, people will just say, well, I'm just going to go back to what I know and what I can earn money from.
Yeah, I think it's a bit like animal rights in the whole, really, isn't it? Because I mean, our group does educational stuff. It's a lot of, you know, obviously we can't do outreach at the moment, but it's educational, and we've always said that education is the longer game. It's you know, you can almost you can scare people into submission and say you're doing this, it's wrong, you know, and look at all these horrible things you're sort of enabling, but actually you've got to sort of like change the mindset, and you have got to educate them. And it does take a long time, but once they've got it for good, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely, and you know, that's really interesting, because education is kind of like, you know, that's everything that we do. I think now is built on that kind of educational model, and I think I learned over time as well from being involved in various animal welfare organisations and also working with Animals Asia, in that, you know, that things don't change very quickly, and that what I learned from this engagement with people a lot. Obviously, I've been engaging with the elephant owners, but we spent a lot of time engaging with zoo managers as well, in terms of practices that they were happening within their zoos, both in China and Vietnam. A lot of the campaigns we've done is trying to sort of end the use of animals in circuses, which we've been quite successful with in Vietnam in particular. But it did involve quite a lot of dialogue through translators with people that were, you know, the ones which were running these circuses and running these zoos. And what I learned from that was that, you know, there was a real gap in terms of what people's understanding of animals really was, because, you know, a lot of the information I was getting back was, look, we've had these bears, these tigers here for 10 years and they're healthy, so therefore I don't understand why they couldn't understand why I was coming to criticize what they were doing. And so it was very much a kind of, okay, well, yes, you feed them, you know, and they haven't got any diseases, but they're very, you know, their welfare is obviously really poor because of the way that you're treating them. And so I think you've got to go right back to basics and sort of start to say, well, what does an animal actually do? What makes up an animal? You know, not particularly to what is good and bad welfare, but how does that animal want to live its life? And so that's where we've kind of taken our educational messages, and we talk a lot now about animal emotions, how, you know, obviously animals experience very similar emotions, whether that be happiness or sadness or fear or depression, anxiety to ourselves, but also, you know, the cognitive abilities of animals, how intelligent animals are, you know, how good they are to cope within their natural environment, and then try to sort of bring those things together and get people to think about, you know, what it is that animal would want if you gave it free choice, you know. And obviously then you're like, well, it certainly wouldn't want to be here, you know, in this environment. It want to be an environment which it's kind of evolved to live in. So I think those messages are really important, because they're the sort of way that I see animals. You know, I see an animal, you know, whether it be a chicken on a chicken farm or a tiger in a circus, and think about, you know, how difficult it must be for that animal to cope in that environment when it's evolved to live in a completely different environment, you know. And so, you know, I want people to think the same thing, you know, and you don't always have to say that's wrong, you know, without explaining what the impact is on that animal, and trying to get people to maybe think, well, yeah, obviously chickens don't, you know, that isn't the way that they would choose to live their life, you know, or that this tiger is going to be suffering from anxiety and stress because it's completely out of its natural environment. So it's a long game, there's a lot of work to do, but I think getting those messages into schools and into the public eye really are what sort of changes people's opinions in the long term.
We I don't know if you've heard, I mean, I know you're in Stockton, so I don't know if you'll have heard of this up here in South Shields. We have a camel parade every year.
I've heard of it, yeah.
And I'm the coordinator against it.
Yeah.
So that's, you talk about the long game. This is like the 6th year.
Yeah.
6-year protest and petitions, the whole thing, you know. We've got Peter Regan on board and everything. But again, it's about you talking about what would the animals do if they had the free choice. They certainly wouldn't be, you know, getting themselves dressed up in lights and having people climb on them, and, you know. But it's just, but this is people who are supposed to, you know, who's supposed to you know, it was talk about Britain being a nation of animal lovers, and they're not.
I know, exactly. Yeah, well, that's the thing, and I think that actually brings us closer together when you're talking to people in Vietnam or in China. You know, because often you can sort of get that kind of like, oh, you know, you've come to my country to criticize me, and I will talk a lot about the problems that are in the UK. You know, about issues that we, you know, that I see every day and issues that we're trying to deal with. You know, I said earlier on that, you know, I have lots of rescued animals. You know, and that's because of a really bad, you know, system that we have here of pet ownership and, you know, an abandonment of animals, etc., etc. So, you know, I talk a lot about that to people and I think that kind of helps to sort of bring you closer together. It's like, look, you know, it's not just, I'm not just here dealing with this issue. You know, I'm concerned about what happens in my country, in my own local area, and I'm also trying to work to change that as well, because attitudes aren't that different. You know, I mean, some people's attitudes are, you know, are very similar in terms of their, you know, a lack of knowledge about animals or a lack of caring about animals, and you do have to try to address that. And I've got 2 kids in the local school here that, you know, I get every single day they go into school, I give them a message about animals, like, you know, just in their lunchbox, and they share that with other kids, just about like how, you know, animals are social animals, or they enjoy being in this sort of environment or whatever, and they do share that, and the teacher shares that with some of the others, and I just think it's just a little way of kind of, you know, sort of spreading that message a little bit further, you know. But yeah, my kids understand that, you know, other kids are growing up, you know, eating, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, we're all vegan, and, you know, but you know, so but their friends are eating, you know, ham sandwiches and chicken sandwiches, and they're really struggling to why those kids don't see it as wrong, you know. So I think, you know, you just have to find that way of getting in, and then sort of, you know, build people's awareness up, and then allow people to make the choices themselves, I guess.
Yeah. So you mentioned veganism there. So like me, you were vegetarian first and for a long period of time, and then you turned to veganism quite a long time afterwards. So what was it that finally made you change, and how easy did you find it in terms of practicality, financially, and emotionally?
Yeah. I mean, I found it very easy when I did switch, and I was kind of like, you know, I think like a lot of people look back and just wish I did it earlier. You know, I mean, you know, I think that's the case, isn't it? You can't turn back time, I guess. But you know, I mean, from, you know, I was vegetarian when I was around about 12, 13. You know, and I made that decision quite young on, like, you know, myself, because my parents weren't vegetarian or vegan. And so, you know, I kind of went against the trend there. But then, yeah, I just spent many years just thinking that was as much as I was prepared to do, I guess. And, you know, and I wasn't looking so much at the farm animal welfare issues for a long time. I was working in other areas, I worked in conservation for a while. And I suppose, you know, I just kind of drifted along in doing other things and looking more at sort of wild animals and captive wild animal issues. And it was only when I started then, you know, working particularly within Animals Asia and started to sort of talk about some of the issues that we talk about. And I realized that actually, you know, I was trying to change people's opinions about using animals in one way, yet here I was completely still part of this industry, you know, with eggs and milk and what have you. So yeah, it wasn't, once it sort of, you know, that light was switched on, it was very easy to do. And obviously, you know, I don't look back other than with regret that I didn't do it easier. But yeah, everything financially, you know, fine. I don't find it a major problem, you know. And I think only now it's just, I'm quite amazed at just how many products there are out there for vegans now. It's kind of just gone crazy, isn't it, these last few years, which is fantastic, you know, and you know, and long may it continue. So now, yeah, it's something which, you know, myself, my wife, my kids, it's just a normal way of life for us. And, you know, I'm glad to say for a number of people within my own family have kind of switched as well, you know. So, and this kind of movement, this sort of vegan movement, obviously now sort of carrying people along. You know, it's a lot easier to kind of get people on board now than it ever used to be.
It is. So do you have any specific memories of animals or people you've worked with when you just thought, this is what it's about? This is kind of like why I'm doing what I'm doing. You know, something which, like something unexpected, or, you know, something at the end of a long project.
Yeah, I suppose for me, then over the last few years, then we've been taking elephants out of elephant riding, you know, and putting them into a national park, and you know, the being able to see those elephants when I go out to Vietnam and spend time with them makes it all worthwhile. A lot of my time is spent behind this computer, organizing spreadsheets, trying to get money in so we can do the job, organizing the staff on the ground on a daily basis. And, it can seem very kind of administrative. And so when you get out there and you just spend the day out in the forest watching, we've got Hanon and Tom Nang and Come On, and and you just see them and you think this is what it's about, because they're just doing what an elephant should do. And I've seen those elephants at their elephant camps previously. So I suppose those are the moments that for me are kind of makes it all worthwhile. But there are lots of others like that kind of you'll never forget about, mainly because you couldn't do anything for them. I mean, I spent a lot of time at sort of animal markets, investigating, taking footage of animal markets in China and Vietnam, and we saw a lot of animals being killed, and and obviously every one of them, you kind of mourn every single one of them, but there are certain individuals that certain things happen at certain times which you just never forget about. And I think for me that's the driving force for doing what we're doing, because you've got the memory of those awful situations that you just couldn't physically do anything about. You couldn't change it for those animals at the time, and those are the things which kind of you think about a lot. And if you're having a moment where you're thinking, well, what are we doing here, you've only got to kind of close your eyes and go back to that situation. You think this is exactly what we're doing here. We need to change this in the long term, and unless we just get on with it, then things won't change.
So some of those things there you've mentioned, I mean, are pretty horrific. So how do you manage your mental health and well-being?
Yeah, well, again, I don't particularly do anything in particular. I think one of the things I think I just naturally did was I started doing the educational work, and I found that that was kind of the positive side of things. Like I think I was doing a lot for sort of in the sort of around about 2010, 2011. All I was doing was visiting an animal circus in China, a bad zoo in China, an animal market somewhere, and documenting. And we were putting a lot of stuff together to sort of go to the government with. But there was a lot, and I think for a few years I was probably getting to that point where something was going to break, because it was just constant, and without really kind of thinking of a strategy of how to deal with it. I think I just thought I needed something positive. And so we started this sort of positive messaging about animals in this education program. And what I found was, in a certain sense, that gives me that kind of, that kind of more positive sort of way of working. So it's not, 5-6 days a week just dealing with animal suffering, but you're actually trying to find ways, look towards developing materials and lesson plans which talk about animals in a positive light. And then when you get to see those things actually being delivered, go to China and see staff delivering these things about animals in a positive light in the schools, that then you get the response from the children. That to me is kind of how I've coped with it, I guess. And that's why I'm such a big sort of advocate now for sort of educational programs, because I think you can deal with a lot of issues by being positive. You can talk a lot if you go in talking about the good things about animals, the way that animals want to live their life, and you can get children excited about nice things that animals do. You can then kind of tack on the things which happen to animals in a bad way, but only do it as a part of something, in the hope that they kind of take that message away. Okay, well, this is how an animal really wants to live its life, and yeah, maybe we do have to think about those bad things. Whereas if you just go in talking about all the horrible things, then one, it's negative for you, but it's also negative for your audience, and you kind of leave everybody dejected at the end of the day, and everybody goes home thinking, oh, it's hopeless, we can't do anything about this. So I think that's been my coping mechanism to a certain extent, just kind of doing this kind of positive messaging, as well as my own animals. I guess probably why I'm filled with a house full of animals, because it's, you feel like you can do as much as possible by bringing as many. Obviously, rescuing animals is well, yourself, it takes up all your time. But you get something from that, right? You get something from giving a life, or giving as much of a good life as possible, to an animal which has suffered. So, but yeah, I think there are different types of people with this, because some people just can't, you let it, if you let it all build up right in the front here all the time, eventually it has to come out, and and that can only be a bad thing, I think, for people. You have to find a way of of putting it, not like forgetting about it, but sort of, putting it to the back of your mind and using it, I guess, for the long-term good. So, but yeah, it's not an easy one. It's definitely not easy.
So you've been obviously with Animals Asia for quite a while now. So how positive do you feel about the progress you've made from when you started to where we are now?
Yeah, I do feel like we've made a lot of progress. I think, as an organization, then, we've achieved a lot within China and now within Vietnam. There wasn't really animal welfare organizations on the ground in China and Vietnam when we started. It was mainly, expats which were doing this kind of work. We didn't really have a team of people. And now over the years, we've built up not only organizations, Chinese animal protection organizations, Vietnamese animal protection organizations, which we've supported, but also individuals within our own team. So now, I've run a team of over 20 people, of which, all of them are Chinese or Vietnamese that are doing animal welfare work on a daily basis in their country. And so that to me is a massive achievement, because those people just wouldn't have been there if Animals Asia hadn't been doing what we're doing. And some of those people have also left to go on to, start up their own organizations or go into other things. So, Animals Asia doesn't do any direct sort of farm animal welfare work, but two of the people that I work with in China have both left Animals Asia to work for Chinese-based farm animal welfare organizations. And, so I keep in touch with them, and there's a sense of sort of pride and happiness, I guess, in that, you've kind of helped to sort of set up this movement and been part of something which is going to, go a long way towards, improving the lives of animals in the long term. So, yeah, I think we've achieved a lot. We've got a lot still to achieve. They're difficult countries to work in, but there's been a real shift in people's attitudes towards animals, particularly within the last few years. But obviously, we've still got a real challenge on our hands to change, some of those industries which are causing that suffering. Yeah.
So what's next for you and for Animals Asia then?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely an expansion of the education programs for me. I think one of the things I've concentrated on recently is trying to work with teachers in China to develop teaching materials for all this sort of information which I talked about before, all these kind of animal concepts of emotions and the importance of these sort of social bonds and the cognitive abilities of animals. I want to now sort of get it into sort of teaching packs that teachers want to deliver themselves, not for anybody to go in to deliver. But so I'm doing a lot of work in terms of trying to get that sort of all set up, both within China, and then I want to expand that into Vietnam as well, so we can get that, it starts getting that into Vietnamese schools as well. We've got a lot of work on with regards to our elephant project, so we're expanding that. We're really hopeful now through the years that we're going to get the government to end elephant riding in Vietnam, which it's a relatively small number of elephants in Vietnam in comparison to places like Thailand and Myanmar, but it would be a real significant for the region, I think, if a country, within Southeast Asia actually says there's no more elephant riding is allowed in this country. It'll make a big statement. So we're kind of working towards that. Animals Asia, as you know, as an organization, we're working towards ending bear farming within Vietnam, and that's something which is on the horizon for us. And then obviously trying to tackle that within China as well. So I do think, I don't want to look too far ahead, but I do think we're making real progress. And I think through this sort of, if we can invest more in the education side of things, I think the progress will happen a lot faster.
Well, that's all my questions for now then. So thank you very much. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you today. Thank you very much for giving up your time. We really appreciate it. And you have our respect for everything you do over there. It's a monumental task, but it sounds like you're making some real progress there. So thank you very much. So I'm just going to sign off now and say this is Anna Malia from Northeast Animal Rights talking to Dave Neale from Animals Asia. So thank you very much,
Anna. Thank you. Bye.